I'll now call to order the virtual meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee. All participants are asked to keep microphones on mute and cameras off during staff presentations and committee discussions. Participants wishing to speak to an application during the public meeting portion of this meeting will be called on by name, one at a time during the public meeting. At that time, the participant called on may unmute their microphone and turn on their camera if they wish to speak. If you wish to speak to or receive further notice regarding any application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. Public participants will receive another sign-in opportunity when the public meeting portion of this meeting is called to order. I am John Wanless, Chair of the Public Advisory Committee. I will now take attendance of our committee members and staff. Please raise your hand or declare your presence when I call your name. Bill Curry. Jacqueline Grimes.
Present.
Councillor Wendy Elford.
Present.
Bill Widmeyer. Jack Anderson.
Attending.
Planning Coordinator Mary Remming.
Present.
Senior Planner Carl Grinke.
Present.
To review, committee members are asked to raise their hand when they wish to speak. Members participating by phone will be called on from time to time to speak to an application. Alternatively, please find an appropriate opportunity at any available time to notify the chair verbally if you wish to speak. Item 2, approval of the agenda. Now, before we vote on this, if you look at the public meeting portion, item number 5, it says in there 23 units. It should be 26. Do I have an approval of the agenda? Wendy, seconded by Bill.
By Bill.
Bill Widmeyer.
I don't have Bill on my screen here at all.
Well, he's right there.
I see the lovely Jacqueline Grimes. I don't see Bill. Okay, that's fine.
Item number 3, adoption of minutes. Planning Advisory Committee meeting, June 18th, 2020.
Move we adopt.
Wendy.
I'll second it.
By Jack. All in favor? Carried. Item 2, Planning Advisory Committee meeting, June 25th, 2020.
Move we adopt.
Wendy.
I'll second.
Second, Jack. All in favor? Disclosure of any monetary interest. We'll now move to item 5, the public meeting. We will now open the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Please be advised you may leave this meeting at any time. Applicants, agents, and members of the public logged into Zoom to participate in the public meeting are asked to please keep their microphones on mute and cameras off until called on by the chair. If you wish to speak to an application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. The purpose of this Planning Advisory Committee meeting is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application that is before us. Application ZA-20-05 for a vacant property on Van Horn Avenue. The application proposes to rezone the subject lands to residential type 6 to allow the apartment building. The zoning proposes specific special exemptions to accommodate the proposed development concept. This meeting is your opportunity to provide any feedback on this application, and the Planning Advisory Committee welcomes any questions and comments you may have. We encourage you to do so at this public meeting, as the Planning Act rules suggest that the public's ability to voice objections later in the process may be limited if a written or oral comment is not submitted. Town Council is in the approval authority for the applications for amendments to the zoning bylaw. The committee will review the application and any comments or concerns from the public to inform the recommendation to council for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I will now pass the meeting over to Senior Planner Carl Grenke to report on notification and summary of application ZA-20-05. Following his presentation, I will call on public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. I will also offer applicants or their agents in attendance an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. For those I haven't met, I'm Carl Grenke, Senior Planner with the town, and I'll be speaking to, I'll be introducing and summarizing the application for the committee and for the public. Dave, do we have the PowerPoint ready to go? Thank you. We'll just let this load for a second. I have a few slides here to go over the application. Next slide, please. So the application that's before us this evening is for a property on Van Horn Avenue, just at the very south end of town. It's right across the road from the Settlers Ridge Mall, and in between a retirement home and an existing townhouse complex. So to the south is Rideau Lakes Township, and a more rural pattern of development. The lot's vacant at the moment. Next slide, please. So the application before us is for a 26-unit apartment building. The applicant, David Simpson, who's present, I believe, in the meeting, is looking for this to be constructed in 3 stories, concentrated at the front of the property closest to the road. So they're looking to minimize any disturbance of the sloped and natural area to the rear. They are proposing a mix of underground parking spaces. So most of the parking spaces would be underneath the existing building in a parking garage, and then 10 at-grade spaces along the side of the lot line facing the Van Horn Manor. So the site is designated in the official plan for residential use. The current zoning R5 is more directed towards townhomes and medium and lower density residential development. So the applicant is applying to rezone to allow a higher density R6 zone with the number of site specific provisions to accommodate the development on the lot. Next slide, please. So what's being proposed here is an R6 special exception. So R6 is the zoning category that best covers apartment buildings like this. And he's looking for, given the constraints of the lot, he's looking for for some site-specific relief. So the zoning bylaw requires 1.25 parking spaces per residential unit. So with 26 units, that would be a total of 33 parking spaces. The applicant proposes 30. They're also proposing to construct a driveway within 3.5 meters of a habitable room window, and also a reduction to interior side yard setback for parking spaces from 1.5 meters to 0.5 meters. So the closest part of the parking lot is proposed to run roughly 0.5 meters, or a little more than a foot, off of the eastern side lot line facing the existing retirement home. Next slide, please. So this is just a broad concept of the development proposed on the lot. You can see the parking on the very left-hand side, and then the the building itself. The applicant is proposing to retain as much of the forested area as possible behind the existing townhomes. So it's a fairly large lot at 1.25 acres roughly, but a very small portion of that lot is actually easily developable. So the applicant is trying to make the best use of the fairly limited amount of space that's available. So that's why some of those site-specific exceptions are being requested at this point. Next slide, please. So along with the application, the applicant has provided a planning rationale, and that's a planning justification report prepared by a consultant planner justifying the application within the context of our official plan. And also conceptual site plan and conceptual elevations have also been provided, and these are of course all available as part of the public record. Next slide, please. So as we can see, the site itself has about 33 meters of frontage, so roughly 110 feet along Van Horn. It's relatively flat just at the very front of the property, and then of course it slopes up behind the proposed development site, and of course behind the neighboring residences as well. So it's that flat grassy area that's proposed for the development. Next slide, please. So this is of course this is a planning application that involves a new development, and like any planning applications, consultation is such an important part of the review process. Through the consultation, we engage technical agencies as well as the surrounding community and local expertise that helps us come to an informed decision on an application. We also engage early with agencies such as the Public Works Department and Rideau Valley Conservation Authority to determine if they have any concerns and what their technical comments are going to be. So in this case, the Public Works Department felt that this particular location on a collector road did not warrant a traffic study. However, there's certainly servicing work that would need to be addressed in a more detailed manner if council approves the zoning. So the Planning Act also prescribes a process for notifying applicable agencies and neighbors. So we're obligated to give 20 days notice. However, given the unique circumstances of the virtual public meeting, and we're giving a little bit more notice just to give people the opportunity to participate, to sign in and provide comments if they choose. So we've been aiming for about a month of notice as much as possible. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the public meeting, of course, we have a proposal that seeks to change the land use rules for an area of land, and before we can make a decision on that application, we need to involve the community and obtain their feedback and perspective. So it's an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback to the committee and to council. It's also an opportunity for the developer themselves to directly to respond to the questions and also make their case as well. And we like to have these meetings be as interactive as possible, have the information be shared, and hopefully that improves the decision-making process for everybody. Next slide, please. So when we have a zoning amendment application and we want to determine whether it's good planning, we look at the official plan. So that's the broad policy document that guides how council envisions the town developing over the next 20 years. So it contains some criteria that we look for intensification in a situation like this. And we also consider the feedback from abutting property owners and neighbors. They would be the ones most impacted by a change in use. So they bring an important local perspective as well. Consideration of feedback from other agencies. So planning staff rely on the expertise of other departments, other agencies who have their own technical expertise, and that all goes into our evaluation. The Planning Advisory Committee has been appointed by council to review applications as well and advise council on on an appropriate response to the application. And the Planning Advisory Committee considers all of the feedback here as well and helping make their recommendation. So town planning staff and the Planning Advisory Committee recommendations will be provided to council at a future meeting, and council will make the ultimate decision on this application based on all of the information provided. Next slide, please. So council will have a few options before them for this application and any other zoning amendment. Council can approve the application as submitted. Council can also approve the application with modifications. So for instance, there can be certain, we can look at the density or the parking or the unit count if council would like to have a closer look at those and make and ask for tweaks. Modifications are those are normally undertaken with a collaborative approach and working with the developer and the public as well. A decision can also be deferred. So if there are some outstanding questions that need a little bit more research, we can go back and obtain that information and come back to either the committee or council to assist in the decision. That's a perfectly reasonable decision to response to a planning application, or the application could be denied. And if council denies the application and the property retains its current R5 zoning. Next slide, please. So design is very important for a multi-residential development. So at this point, the zoning focuses on land use. So the apartment building, the scale, the massing that's being proposed. If council approves the land use, there's a whole bunch of other technical design issues that typically aren't dealt with zoning or are dealt with through site plan control. And that's where we get into things like stormwater management, site servicing. Landscaping is going to be very important here. Any of the engineering and access improvements that may need to be done. Ultimately, we try to ensure a compatible, functional and attractive development within the neighborhood. So if the principle of the use is approved through zoning, site plan control would address all of those other matters, and that would come later, and that would also be reviewed. A site plan application would also be reviewed by this committee and placed in front of council for a decision. Next slide, please. So at this point, we'll move into the interactive part of the public meeting, and certainly I welcome and invite feedback from anybody here. So as far as the next steps go, following this meeting, we will be working on a report and a recommendation to council, and ultimately council's decision is subject to a 20-day appeal period. So if you've signed in or have provided something in writing beforehand, we ask you to ensure your name is with Mary so that you'll be notified of council's decision. So I'll pause there, and I'll turn the floor back to the chair and the public part of the meeting. Thank you for your interest and participating this evening.
Thank you, Carl. We'll begin by hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you signed in with the recording secretary and have requested to speak to the application, I will call you by name one at a time to offer your feedback. Rose Darrell.
Yes, hello. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, I can hear you, can't see you.
Oh, I haven't hit that yet. Start video. Okay.
Okay.
This is only my second ever Zoom, so I don't know what I'm doing. And the last one was a Star Trek Zoom. Like the other people that have sent you letters from, I live at 65 Van Horn, which is the unit right up at the top of the hill at the red light. Is there any chance that the back area, the back green area behind the houses can be developed? In the present, it says that there's no plans to do anything to that space, but is there a chance that something might get done to that space in the future? And I might just made a few notes. It seems to me that if this building is too large for the space with insufficient parking, people will use the road and the mall's parking lot. We know that will happen. I'm also concerned about the right of way for access into the backyards of the people near the bottom of the hill. Also, where are such things as garbage and recycling bins going to go to? Mr. Sommer's letter to you had a lot of valid points, including the grass strip and the footage. It appears that the large grass strip has been included in the amount of square footage, which might allow for the more units in the building. That just to me seems wrong because it's not usable space. I realize that this is being up at the top of the hill, this is going to have less of an impact on me because I'm furthest away. But I just moved here in September last year. So I moved here because of that huge green area behind me. If there was any chance of anything happening to that, I wouldn't have moved here. I lived in Ottawa for the last 30 years and I just moved to Smiths Falls this year. I moved into 65 Van Horn on my 65th birthday. But that's my concern because I know if it's 3 stories tall, it's really going to affect both the units at the bottom of the hill of the townhomes and that seniors building. It just seems too crowded. And I guess that's my point.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that, Carl?
Well, I appreciate the feedback and coming out and joining us this evening. Those are certainly points that I look forward to. I look forward to the comments from the applicant who can speak to some of them. But that's definitely these are definitely the land use planning considerations that staff and the committee are going to need to consider as we formulate our recommendations to council on the application. And I think specific comments and questions regarding the development itself, I would defer to Mr. Simpson to speak on. But I appreciate the comment.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Rose. We have no one else from the public signed in, so other than the written comments we received. So I'm going to ask David Simpson, who's the property agent.
Hi, am I coming in clear?
Yes, you are. Perfect.
The site is 1.25 acres, and as Carl had indicated, the existing R5 zoning would allow up to 26 units if the site were more, how can I say it? If the site were more friendly to that type of development, the existing zoning will allow 26 units. And we think that the 26 units as a townhouse development might cut into some of that green space behind the townhouses. And so that's why we were looking at doing the apartment building. I read Chris's letter, and I have a lot of respect for Chris, and we have really no intention of creating issues for settlers, the property across the street. And so I know we're asking for some relief on parking, and I think a townhouse development on that site would probably create more issues than than what an apartment building will do. We've tried to meet the zoning, and I mean, we've tried to meet the parking, and we're quite comfortable with reducing the number of units from 26 to 24, and that would eliminate the requirement for the parking, the reduction in parking. It is a little bit of an unusual site. We can create parking on the green space behind the townhouses, but we don't want to do that. We want to, I think the neighbors that have maintained that area behind the townhouses, somebody mows it and somebody looks after it, and there's been some absolutely gorgeous landscaping done along there, and we want to preserve that. And so we want to create as the minimal effect to the neighbors. We've tried to keep it very simple. I was involved in the development of both Van Horn Manor and the 12 townhouses that are beside us. And, you know, if I look back at the notes to the public meetings when we had them rezoned, we probably had some objections from somebody at that point in time, but I think overall it's turned out rather nicely. And I think the apartment building, I know that based on the size of the site, which is 1.25 acres, we could in fact go up to 40 units based on the calculations under the R4, under the R6 zoning, but we're not interested in doing that. We're quite happy to limit the number of units to 24 instead of the 26, and that would provide the parking that we need. It would maintain the green space behind the townhouses, and I think it works very well in that location, and I think it does minimal. I think it'll look very nice, and I don't. We don't have any plans for fencing. We don't want to block the view from the townhouses, and I'm sure you've heard it before, but you know, what you own is what you get to look at. And in this case, we own the property in behind, and we're not taking away any views. We're simply adding something else to the town of Smiths Falls, and in order to meet the zoning for parking, we're prepared to reduce the number of units from 26 to 24. And as far as Rose is concerned, we have no future plan to develop the green space behind the townhouses, and so it'll have minimum effect on them. And as Carl can confirm, once site plan is approved, we're not going to change it down the road.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
I'll now ask if there are any questions or comments from committee members.
Mr. Chair, I just have a few questions, Mr. Chair.
Jacqueline?
Can you hear me okay? There's construction on Beckwith Street. Is it okay?
Yeah.
So I just have a few questions, Mr. Chair. Maybe they can be directed at Dave Simpson. So just looking at the sketch, is it correct to say that between the current townhomes and the building, that's just green space?
Yes. Well, there is a right of way which allows the townhouses to go from Van Horn around behind to get into their backyards.
Right.
And so and so that was part of it was an approved right away by the municipality. We've got a setback from that right of way, which meets the zoning bylaw. And so the right of way will not be affected. It will not be blocked. It belongs to the owners of the townhouses. So we will not disturb it in any way. And yes, you're correct. That is a green space between the right of way for the townhouses and the edge of the apartment building.
Did you have something else, Jacqueline?
Jacqueline?
Yeah, I did. Still haven't addressed the garbage question. And then just one other more curious question is, so we're talking about three parking spaces. So just, I know there is a slope at the back of the property. Just wondering why there couldn't be 3 more spaces at the rear of this building. Like, is it just not possible with the
I think that we could probably find the additional space for the three parking spaces. I don't think that would be an issue, but I'm quite comfortable to simply reduce the number of units by 2, and I think that's pretty close to meeting the bylaw. I think we need 30.5 and based on 24 units. And so Carl can answer that for me. Maybe we can create a bicycle parking spot or something to make that other half a unit. But we'd like to, the back area behind Van Horn Manor and behind the townhouses is absolutely beautiful, going up into the hill and with the trees. And so we would really like to preserve as much of it as we can. And so I'd rather reduce the number of units by 2 if that works. I know it's 1 1/4 parking spaces per unit, and we need to reduce it by 3, but I think that's pretty close.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Jack?
I have some real concerns here, and it comes back to the parking. And I'm quite familiar with this area. And as far as Van Horn, the retirement center is concerned, on its easternmost border, it's on a very strict curve, or extreme curve there. And so there's no parking of cars. And so a lot of the cars, the staff are parking in the parking lot, and there's a fair number of spaces that are taken by residents there. Anyway, there's parking which I have seen up towards Highway 29 and on the side of the street there, obviously. And that's with the regular traffic that there is. Also, I feel that I think we all know human nature, that a lot of people are going to be parking in the Settlers Ridge Mall. And I know we received the communication from that group. And what bothers me there is that anybody parking across the street is, that's adding to the liability of that Settlers Ridge group. And also, it is private property. And I know people who, they look at the traffic that's going towards the high school, going towards Settlers Ridge Mall and that. And I think that these people, they're going to be quite comfortable to park in there. And if they were using the stores and merchants within there, that would be fine. But I think it's going to become a second parking area, and that's my concern. And Jacqueline, when she was mentioning about the garbage, etc., and that's a concern. but mostly it's the parking. And I think that's pretty well it. One other time when one of our considerations I mentioned about snow removal and that, and again I'm thinking of this area. Mr. Simpson has mentioned about drawing this down to 24 units, but my concern more than anything is the parking.
Thanks. Jacqueline?
I just have a comment to that. I mean, if you're talking about 26 units at 20 parking spaces are going to be underground this building, you can't tell me that in the winter, a resident of this building is going to park across the street. I don't disagree, Jack. I mean, I do feel that visitors and excess parking definitely, there is the potential for overflow across the street, but 20 spaces underground, I mean, the actual residents, you're going to be parking underneath in your own parking spot where it's safe and secure and out of the snow. I don't disagree with all that you're saying, Jack, but we have to consider that 20 of the spaces are underground.
Well, I believe I know human nature, and that they will utilize that space across the street. Not everybody, I'm not saying everybody, certainly, but guests and and occasional people perhaps doing business there, they're going to be parking across the street. And the Samara Group have been instrumental in bringing the town along, and they realize themselves what's going to happen.
Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any problem with the actual zoning being moved to R6. I think I would prefer the lesser units so that they meet the lesser number of units going down to 24, just so that as Mr. Simpson said, they would meet the parking. I don't have, well, that may be human nature for people to go park over in someone else's property. That would be the same all over Smith Falls, not specific to this site. And that will be up for, bylaw enforcement, or that would have to be, I don't think that should be a consideration for this particular application, because yes, people will park where they shouldn't, and then the bylaws will have to be enforced, or the private landowners will have to have towing or whatever that's going to take. But I don't think, like Jacqueline, I don't think that's going to be a major problem. I would have some questions for Mr. Simpson. I expect, and I know we get to this in site plan control, but will the garbage and snow be, it appears from the sketch that you have enough room still at the back to accommodate garbage and wherever you're going to plow your snow to. Is that
yes,
fair?
That will be addressed in the site plan application, and I apologize, we haven't addressed it for this meeting, but yes, we will address the snow removal and the garbage as part of our site plan application. And so I'm well aware of those two issues, but I apologize, it just wasn't addressed.
Oh, no, it's not necessary for this. I know we'll get to it, but the plan isn't to put the garbage out near the road or anything. It's going to be back behind the building, I assume. The other thing that I found helpful, I think many of us found helpful, was to have like your drawings are good, but we can't, it's difficult for neighbors and committee members to visualize what this will look like in the space, like in terms of the height and where it is spatially in relation to the townhouses and the LTC that's beside it. So I'm just wondering, I found that helpful when we requested that from person before, just to be able to spatially see it in relation to everything else that's there. I love the fact that there's no plan to develop or do anything with that grassy bit behind. So I think it might be helpful for the neighbors and for this committee to see a concept drawing with it in relation to the other things that are in that neighborhood. That would be helpful to me anyway.
Well, there was a concept profile provided, and you're right. It doesn't put it into relation to the other, but the lot is the lower. It's lower than I'm not sure what the last townhouse unit number is, 43 or 41, right beside us. And so I think we're substantially below it. And so when you compare the two, we are obviously higher. And Van Horn Manor has a different massing. And again, it's got a fairly high point on the front entrance. And so I think what we've done will fit very nicely as a three-story building between the two properties.
Yeah, because it's lower, it's down further on the slope of that street.
Correct.
Right. It still doesn't show me what it looks like spatially in relation to both Van Horn Manor and the townhomes.
Yeah.
If Carl, do we have a concept drawing that we could see at some point in relation to the others, or just a concept line drawing?
Just a concept.
Yeah. So all that. So what I have is the building elevations. They don't show the height and massing in relation to the neighbors, but they show the concept render for what it's going to look like on that individual lot and also the site plan.
Okay, I think that was my colleagues and have asked some of the questions I would have asked. So thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
I've got a question. Well, it's not a question. I'm going to make a statement here regarding the building and the parking. And we've got perfect examples around the mall. We've got the Barrington. They're not parking in the mall. We've got two apartment buildings on Toulon. They're not parking in the mall. They've got their own parking spots, elevated for their own purpose on their own property. And this concept has no, with the underground parking and the surface parking, I think is perfectly fine. And the fact it's being reduced to 24 units is perfectly fine with me. And the back area, the treat area to be maintained is not going to take anything, it's not going to be any different than what it is now because there's no development back there. Jacqueline, you had a question?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just the bullet point number 2 on the report, permit the construction of a driveway within 3.5 meters of a habitable room window. How close are we talking? We're talking, what is within mean? How close? Normally we have, like on the next bullet point, a reduction in the required interior from 1.5 to 0.5. So what is the actual from a habitable room window? Do we have an exact window rather than just within 0.5?
Carl? Carl?
Oh, hi, it's Dave Simpson again. Can I jump in for a minute?
Yes, David.
No, we don't have an exact measurement at this point in time, but we are providing an entrance to an underground underground parking on that side, and so because of the entrance, the driveway will come right up under the building, obviously. But as far as the setback, again, I apologize. I don't know what the exact number is at this point in time, but I think it would be. I think there wouldn't be much reduction from the 3.5. It might be. It might be half of that, but because we have to enter the underground parking, it comes right up to the building.
Carl?
So
Thanks, David.
thank you. So this the habitable room setback it's an interesting provision in the bylaw, and I believe, but I'm going to ask Mr. Simpson to confirm in this case that the 3.5 meter reduction is in order to allow the driveway closer to habitable room windows of the building that he's looking to build, correct? Not go within 3.5 meters of a habitable room window from an existing residential dwelling on a neighboring property. Could you confirm that, please?
You're absolutely right. It's the distance to our building, not somebody else's.
Thank you.
Wendy?
Carl, because we just had a recent, the same kind of thing over on Phillip Street to reduce the setback from the driveway to a habitable window over there as well. I can't remember what the amount was, but we've done this before.
Yes, it's a similar situation. The driveway was very close to a number of the rooms. So it's of the building they're looking to build. So that exception doesn't apply if the driveway is directly attributable to the occupant of that particular unit. So if you're building a house, you can put the driveway further. You can put the driveway that close if your own driveway that close. In this case, we're just casting the net wide and capturing the fact that there's going to be people who aren't the tenants of those particular closest windows who are going to be using that driveway.
Just, can I also ask, Mr. Chair, so the reduction of the required interior side yard setback from 1.5 to 0.5, we also did something very similar because it's the parking lot. We also did something similar to that recently. Mr. Chair, where is he gone? He's still there, but we've lost his picture. Still there, John?
Excuse us a moment, everyone. John's been disconnected. His tablet has died. Just a moment.
Thank you. So maybe you could answer that question, Carl, though.
Well, I believe with respect to 8 to 10 Phillip Street, I don't think that we granted a relief from the 1.5 meters there. And I'd have to go into that. I'm pretty sure they still kept that. Okay. But they kept that around the exterior. Oh, no, actually, you're right. We reduced that for along the shared driveway that was in between the two lots, but they maintained the 1.25 around surrounding residences off-site there. So in this case, what's being proposed as part of this application is a 0.5 meter setback along the eastern side lot line closest to the Van Horn Manor. So there'd be a very small,
which is their parking lot. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There's the part of the Van Horn Manor on the parking lot there. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that's all for now.
Mary, is John having any luck reconnecting?
So just because we can't continue the meeting because we don't have quorum, just for those who are listening. Oh, John's coming back.
He looks shorter. Oh, there he is.
Welcome back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. What did I miss?
Just the answer to one question that I had asked Carl about the 8 to 10 Phillips, where we had lessened the setback to a habitable window in that particular case as well. That was all. Then we all went quiet until you got back.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you. We have the committee has the task of making a recommendation to council on the zoning bylaw amendment application. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain the motion.
Mr. Chair, I think our senior planner had something before we moved on.
Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify with respect to the parking. So at 1.25 parking spaces per unit, if the proposal were to be reduced to 24 units, then at 1.25 parking spaces, that would require a total of 30 spaces. So if there's a fraction, it would have to be rounded up. But in this case, it sounds like they would be. It sounds like they would fit. So bike lanes were brought up. That's an excellent point. Our zoning bylaw does not prescribe bike racks. However, I've made a habit of asking for bike racks on site plan applications for multi-residential development. So if council approves the zoning, then I'll certainly be looking at having that discussion through the site plan stage. I think the challenge we have and with this is the zoning bylaw for the R6 zone prescribes 101 unit per 130 square meters of area. So that does, just looking strictly speaking at the lot area, that does allow a density that's higher than what we have, than what's being proposed here. That being said, of course, every site is unique and doesn't mean that every site would be suitable for that. So I think, so certainly that's part of the committee's consideration here is it is a large site, but what's the appropriate density of development on that site? And certainly I'd encourage you to consider that in your recommendation. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be looking at when I'm presenting my report to council as well.
Wendy?
Mr. Chair, for those listening or watching, I was just looking at some of the questions and concerns they had brought up in their letters. And for people not familiar with this process, some of them would be dealt with, and maybe you yourself or Carl could kind of tell them what happens next with site plan control. If this zoning goes ahead, if council approves it, then some of the detail that they're mentioning would be handled in site plan control rather than the zoning change.
Carl?
Yep, so Councillor Alford is absolutely correct. The zoning at this point, we're looking at the use, the mass, the density, just the overall big picture principle of the development. So if that gets approved by council, that's the applicant is going to be coming back with a detailed technical proposal, including servicing details, including landscaping, and that's where policies of our official plan kick in that relate to design and compatibility, as establishing the appropriate conditions of development, if you can call it that, to ensure that the stormwater doesn't get directed onto neighboring properties, that we look at fencing if fencing is required, we look at lighting if lighting is required, and of course landscaping, trees, those sorts of things, just to ensure that the specifics of the development are best designed to fit in with the overall neighborhood.
Wendy?
Just one other note, Mr. Chair, because some of the questions are asking, about the demographics and, will there be subs? all that stuff is not really within the purview of people are allowed to do on their property what is provided for by site plan control and zoning. So some of it would probably not be considered by this committee or any committee, even council. Some of the questions that have been asked are really not part of the role of this committee, or in fact, maybe even council.
Thank you. So is the committee ready to entertain a motion? Wendy?
I would move that the committee approve the zoning change, but for 24 units as opposed to 26.
Do I have a seconder? Bill? All in favor? Carried.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you for. Carl?
Sorry, I'm just looking to confirm that the committee is okay with the parking setback reduction to 0.5 meters, as well as the habitable room window. I think the parking number of parking spaces would no longer need relief, but those other two, I just looking to confirm the committee is still okay with those details.
I have
That should be included in the motion, I guess. So it would be with modifications. The town or the staff's recommendation was, I'm trying to find it here. Approve application with modifications, which we're going to 24, and the other two can stand the way they were. That would be in the motion.
Yeah, well, the relief for the setback for the parking, I have no problem with that because it's on the side of Van Horn parking lot. You're not up against another building or anything like that, so there's lots of open space there between it.
I agree with that too.
So I moved that, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Was there a seconder, or did we already do that?
Bill seconded.
Oh, yes, okay. So we're still in favor.
We're still in favor. Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process for the application ZA 20-05. Any participants that have not signed in and require further notice regarding the application is asked to please reach out to the planning coordinator, Mary Remig, by phone at Town Hall. Appeal rights, as prescribed by the Planning Act, will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This concludes the meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee. We will now move on to the next item on our agenda.
Thank you very much thank you for everything.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. We'll move on to item number 6, priority issues. Is that one working up there? Site plan control application SP-20-05, Bellamy Farms, first phase, block 3. Mary is going to do the presentation on this. Oh, well, you can sit down here. Sit down.
We're switching seats now, everyone. We're trying to be accommodating. All right. So, I mean, this one, we're going to keep it brief, much shorter than the last one. This is for the next set of Bellamy Farms subdivision. So this is blocks 3, 12, and 14. Block 3 is a single story with 4 units. They'll range from about 1,540 square feet to 1,601 square feet. So this is on the west side of the Farrar Drive, close to the Cataraqui Trail. Blocks 12 and 14 are 2-story units. All units will be roughly 1,598 square feet in area. Both of these blocks are on Staples Boulevard. Block 12 will have 4 units and block 14 will have 5. All blocks will have different color profiles. Other aspects such as vegetation and driveway access of the application are consistent with previous applications, and staff are seeking the committee's support of the application in principle, subject to any comments members wish to bring forward. Kept it nice and brief tonight.
Yes, please, motion.
Okay, I need a motion to for this site plan and control application. Wendy?
Second.
I don't do, we're just supporting in principle? Is that the recommendation? Carl and Mary, planning staff recommend the PAC support in principle, support the principle of this application.
That's correct.
Okay. Then if that's the motion, then I would move that. I am very glad to see 1 stories.
Okay, moved by, and you got Jack? All in favor? Carried. Item number 7, correspondence items. Item number 8, project updates. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just like to give the committee an update on some of the files that have some of the zoning files that have crossed your desks over the last few months. One, back in November, we considered a zoning amendment application for 65 Chambers Street. That's what they were looking to do is just accommodate two additional units within the converted dwelling. So there was that one did go through some more work following the public meeting based on some feedback that we did receive. There were modifications to the application to relocate the to the backyard there, to relocate a couple of parking spaces out of the front yard and accommodate all of those at the rear. There are also servicing constraints that were based on a unique arrangement on that property where it and its neighbors are serviced by an old pipe that along their rear lot lines and then connecting to the public service on Giles Street, and there are some concerns regarding the capacity and potential liability. So we needed to so staff needed to obtain legal opinion and technical opinion with respect to the to those concerns. So once we have that, we brought the report back to council, and it was the bylaw was approved. One Old Slies Road, that was that's the nice little infill there right next to the lock station there. That was approved by council a few weeks back, and we expect a site plan application to come in shortly. The applicants continue to work with Parks Canada on some of those details, and Parks has advised that they're very pleased with the level of collaboration and how that process is unfolding. So hopefully we'll have something for you on that. Last meeting, we had a zoning and official plan amendment public hearing for 16 units on Beckwith Street. One of the concerns that came up at the meeting was in relation to fencing. I met with the developer on site last Friday afternoon, and there certainly is a grade change there, and what we're looking right around the lot line there is going to be a retaining wall close to that lot line, reflecting that, and the proponent is looking to put a 6 foot high fence along that rear lot line. So taking that in addition to the grade change, that's probably going to the parking area for this for the apartment is probably going to be about 9 feet lower than. There's going to be a pretty significant visual barrier just with the retaining wall and the fence. There's a couple of mature trees on that site too. probably going to lose the sugar maple. Unfortunately, it's a beautiful tree, but there are a couple of black walnuts at the back, and certainly with my strong encouragement, the proponent would like to keep those if at all possible. We're working with them on some of the OP and zoning wording with respect to the community density bonusing. That's a new one with us, and it's taking it needs some further. It needs a little bit of work and bouncing ideas back and forth. So we look forward to taking that to council soon. Any questions?
Thank you, Carl. Item number 9, next meeting, Planning Advisory Committee meeting, August the 13th, 2020. Do I have a motion, Carl?
Yes. So, sorry to jump in again. We have some volume of applications, and what we're proposing is holding the regular meeting on the 13th. I believe we have at least one zoning and one minor variance application ready to go on that date. Perhaps another, I think another variance might be coming in as well. But we also have a proposal for 132 unit apartment complex by Lapine Developments. I know council's been made aware of that at the old South Unit site. So that's going to require a zoning amendment as well, and that staff are recommending that we schedule a special meetings given the size of the proposal and the possibility for significant community interest. We're recommending a special meeting where we just have that one application on the agenda, and we're suggesting August 20th for that. So unfortunately, that would mean another 2 meeting month, but we'll take the committee's direction on how you want to proceed with the scheduling.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Jack?
Is it possible that, that we get a concept drawing with every application or most applications? I know with McCann Street, that came out and it made our decision easier. And I just wonder if this is something that we could ask. I'm sure that, each developer would be able to provide this.
Carl?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we can get you that for the South Unit Hospital site. The applicant has provided concept render site plans as well as some supporting information, and we can certainly circulate that and anything else that the committee would like to see with the notice well in advance of the meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Wendy?
Not a question really, but just kudos to Carl. I'm watching the new Kentucky Fried Chicken and the landscaping at that corner. It really is going to be quite a lovely addition to one of our main entrances. So I know it was through our hands a while ago, but it's starting to really take shape and look nice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Jack? Seconded by Jack. Seconded by Jack. Good night.
Carl's got something. Carl's got something, John.
Sorry, I'm just confirming, is the committee okay with the 13th and the 20th?
Yes, I am.
Yep.
And as many times as you need us to meet while this thing is booming, that makes me happy. It makes us all happy.